shadows of obligation. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 5 times, rousing Elise Winters from a fitful sleep. She slipped from beneath silk sheets, careful not to disturb the emptiness beside her. Not that there was anyone to disturb. Julian had maintained separate bedrooms since their wedding day 2 years ago. Elise padded across the plush carpet to her private bathroom, avoiding her reflection in the ornate mirror. She didn't need a reminder of how she looked. Tired eyes and a pretty face, the portrait of a woman who had everything and nothing simultaneously. By 6 o'clock, she was in the kitchen preparing breakfast. The ritual was familiar: coffee brewing, toast browning, fruit arranged artfully on Julian's plate. He preferred his coffee black, his eggs precisely cooked for 4 minutes, and his schedule uninterrupted by trivial conversation. These preferences she had learned through observation rather than intimacy. At precisely 6:30, Julian Hargrove descended the curved staircase, his footsteps measured and confident. His charcoal suit was impeccably tailored, his auburn hair styled with precision, and his amber eyes already focused on the financial reports in his hand rather than the woman who had prepared his meal. "Good morning," Elise offered, her voice quiet in the cavernous kitchen. Julian nodded without looking up, taking his coffee and sitting at the opposite end of the marble island. The silence between them stretched like a living thing, familiar and suffocating. Elise nibbled her toast, mind wandering to the circumstances that had brought her here. The Winters family had been respected in musical circles for generations, but her father's ill-fated investment in a fraudulent arts foundation had collapsed their modest fortune. With creditors circling and her mother's health failing from stress, Elise had been desperate. Then came the Hargroves with their proposition: marriage to their only son, Julian in exchange for financial salvation. The arrangement was presented as mutually beneficial. The old money Hargroves needed a cultured, well-bred wife for their heir, and the Winters needed immediate financial rescue. Julian had been brutally honest during their first meeting. "This is a business transaction," he had stated, his expression neutral. "I require a socially acceptable partner for public appearances and family obligations. In return, your family's debts will be paid, and you'll have financial security." What he hadn't mentioned was the complete emotional isolation she would endure. Elise's contemplation was interrupted by Julian clearing his throat. She glanced up, surprised to find him looking directly at her. "I need you to attend the Meridian Gala with me tonight," he said, his deep voice betraying no emotion. Elise nearly dropped her teacup. "The Meridian Gala? But you've never required your presence at business functions before?" "Circumstances change. Several international investors will be there. Having my wife present projects stability." The way he said "my wife" sounded like "my property." Elise straightened her shoulders. "What time?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. 7. Wear something appropriate." Julian stood, tucking his reports into his leather briefcase. He hesitated, then added, "Blue would be suitable. It complements your eyes." Before Elise could recover from the shock of this personal observation, he was gone, the front door closing with a definitive click. Elise remained at the island, stunned. In 2 years of marriage, Julian had never commented on her appearance. She wandered to the conservatory where her grand piano stood waiting, the only thing that had truly come with her to this gilded cage. Her fingers found the keys automatically, drawing out a melancholy Chopin nocturne that echoed her confusion. Before her marriage, Elise had been a rising concert pianist. Now she played only for herself, her talent another thing entombed within these mansion walls. As evening approached, Elise stood before her closet, considering Julian's request. She finally selected a midnight blue gown with a sweetheart neckline and delicate silver beading. The dress had been an impulsive purchase months ago, a reminder of who she had been before becoming Mrs. Hargrove. When she descended the staircase at 7, Julian was waiting in the foyer. For a fleeting moment, something flickered across his usually impassive face. "You look..." He paused, seeming to search for an appropriate word. "Presentable." Elise swallowed her disappointment. "Thank you." Shall we go? As Julian's hand lightly touched the small of her back to guide her to the waiting car, Elise realized it was the first time they had touched in months. The evening ahead suddenly felt dangerously unpredictable. Awakening desires. The Meridian Gala transformed the ordinary into the extraordinary. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the ballroom, where Boston's elite mingled in a choreographed dance of wealth and influence. Elise felt oddly disconnected as Julian guided her through the crowd, his hand maintaining that unfamiliar presence at the small of her back. "Mrs. Hargrove, what a pleasure to finally meet you," became the refrain of the evening, often accompanied by curious glances that silently questioned her prolonged absence from Julian's public life. "My wife has been focused on her musical pursuits," Julian would explain smoothly, as though her isolation had been a choice rather than his design. Elise smiled and nodded, playing her part perfectly. She was, after all, a performer by training. Yet beneath the practiced smile, questions bubbled. Why now? What had changed to make Julian suddenly acknowledge her existence? The answer arrived in the form of Nathaniel Foster. "Julian Hargrove, you old shark!" a warm voice called out, cutting through the artificial politeness surrounding them. Elise turned to see a man approaching, his smile genuine and his posture relaxed in contrast to the stiff formality dominating the room. With tousled chestnut hair, intelligent green eyes, and a slightly crooked bow tie, he stood out like watercolor in a room full of precise pencil drawings. "Foster," Julian acknowledged, his tone shifting subtly. "I wasn't aware you'd be attending." "Last-minute invitation," Nathaniel replied, his gaze shifting to Elise. "And who is this vision in blue?" Julian's fingers pressed more firmly against Elise's back. "My wife, Elise Hargrove." "Elise, this is Nathaniel Foster. He runs a sustainable development company." "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Hargrove," Nathaniel said, taking her extended hand and holding it a moment longer than convention dictated. "Julian has been keeping you quite the secret." "Please call me Elise," she replied, surprised by the warmth in her own voice. "And what kind of sustainable development do you focus on, Mr. Foster?" "Nathaniel, please." His eyes crinkled when he smiled. "We create eco-friendly performance venues and cultural centers in underserved communities. The acoustics in our concert halls have been praised by some of the world's finest musicians." Elise felt herself leaning forward with genuine interest. "Really? What considerations go into designing for optimal acoustics?" As Nathaniel launched into an enthusiastic explanation, Elise found herself engaged in the first meaningful conversation she'd had in months. He spoke about music with knowledge and passion, asking insightful questions about her training at Juilliard and her perspectives on modern compositions. "You seem remarkably knowledgeable about classical music for a businessman," Elise observed. Nathaniel laughed. "My mother was a cellist with the Chicago Symphony. I grew up backstage, surrounded by music and musicians." Julian cleared his throat pointedly. "Foster's company is seeking investment for expansion into South America," he interjected, his voice unusually tight. "Rather ambitious plans." "Not ambition, necessity," Nathaniel countered. "Cultural infrastructure creates community resilience. Speaking of which," he turned to Elise, "we're looking for a director of cultural programming for our new projects. Someone with classical training who understands how performance spaces should function." Elise felt Julian stiffen beside her. "Are you offering my wife a job, Foster?" Julian asked, his tone dangerously calm. "I'm recognizing talent," Nathaniel replied evenly. "Talent shouldn't be hidden away." Before Julian could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of other investors. Nathaniel excused himself, but not before slipping a business card into Elise's hand. "Think about it," he whispered. "Your talent deserves an audience." The drive home unfolded in tense silence. Julian gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles whitened, while Elise gazed out the window, Nathaniel's card burning a hole in her clutch purse. "He was quite forward," Julian finally said, breaking the silence. "He was interesting," Elise countered. "And he actually saw me as a person, not an accessory." Julian's jaw tightened. "Is that what you think you are to me? An accessory? What else would you call it, Julian? You married me to settle a debt and promptly forgot I existed." The car pulled into their driveway, engine silenced, leaving them in darkness broken only by the dashboard lights illuminating Julian's troubled expression. "I never forgot you existed," he said quietly. That was the problem. Before Elise could decipher his cryptic statement, Julian exited the car and walked into the house, leaving her alone with her confusion. The next morning, Elise awakened to an unfamiliar aroma. Following it downstairs, she discovered Julian in the kitchen, attempting to make pancakes. He'd shed his usual armor of tailored suits for jeans and a casual button-down, sleeves rolled to expose forearms dusted with auburn hair. "You're cooking," she stated, unable to mask her astonishment. Julian turned, spatula in hand. "I thought we could have breakfast together." "Why?" The question escaped before she could filter it. Setting down the spatula, Julian faced her fully. "Because I've been a terrible husband, and it's time that changed." Elise approached cautiously, accepting the plate he offered. The pancakes were slightly burnt on one side, perfectly golden on the other. It was the most human thing about Julian she'd ever seen. "What brought this on?" she asked, cutting a small piece. "Foster?" Julian's hesitation spoke volumes. "Seeing you with him. Seeing how you lit up when you talked about music. I realized what I've been denying both of us." "And what's that?" "A real marriage." Elise's fork froze halfway to her mouth. 2 years of indifference can't be erased with pancakes, Julian." "I know," he acknowledged, his amber eyes meeting hers directly. "But it's a start." Before Elise could respond, her phone chimed. Nathaniel's name appeared on the screen. "Good morning, Elise." His cheerful voice filled the kitchen. "I hope I'm not calling too early, but I wanted to discuss that position in more detail. Perhaps over dinner tonight?" Elise looked up to find Julian watching her intently, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "I'd like that," she replied, maintaining eye contact with her husband. Julian's face hardened instantly. "I see you've made your choice," he said, turning away. "No," Elise corrected after ending the call. "I've simply decided to explore my options. You had 2 years to see me, Julian. Why should I believe anything has changed just because another man has shown interest?" "Because I'm finally admitting what I've always known," Julian said, moving toward her with newfound determination. "Don't go to dinner with him, Elise. Stay. Let me show you who I really am beneath this facade." For a moment, Elise wavered. There was something in Julian's eyes she'd never seen before, something raw and honest that called to her. "One dinner," she said finally, "to hear what Nathaniel has to offer. After that, we'll talk." Julian nodded once, acceptance and determination mingling in his expression. "When you come home tonight, we'll finish this conversation. And Elise, I won't let you go without a fight." The intensity in his voice sent an unexpected shiver down Elise's spine. For the first time in their marriage, she saw not Julian Hargrove, business tycoon, but simply a man afraid of losing something precious. Hearts unveiled, the restaurant Nathaniel had chosen was everything Julian's world was not. Warm, inviting, and unpretentious. Exposed brick walls displayed local artwork, and soft jazz created an intimate atmosphere without overwhelming conversation. It was exactly the kind of place Elise would have chosen herself. "I hope this meets your approval," Nathaniel said, pulling out her chair with a flourish. "I thought you might appreciate something authentic after all that Meridian Gala pretension." Elise smiled, settling into her seat. "It's perfect. A welcome change from crystal chandeliers and forced small talk." As they ordered, Nathaniel spoke passionately about his company's mission, describing performance venues in Colombia and Ecuador that had transformed struggling communities. His eyes lit up when discussing how local musicians had flourished with proper facilities and support. "That's why I need someone like you," he explained, leaning forward earnestly. "Someone who understands both the technical aspects of performance spaces and the soul of the music itself. The position would involve travel, creative freedom, and real purpose." "It sounds wonderful," Elise admitted, her mind racing with possibilities. "But I should be transparent. My situation is complicated." Nathaniel's gaze softened. "Julian? Yes, things are changing between us. I'm not sure what that means yet." Setting down his wine glass, Nathaniel studied her. "May I speak frankly?" When Elise nodded, he continued. "I've known Julian for years. We were at university together. He's brilliant but guarded, always has been. His father was notoriously cold, taught him that business success required emotional detachment. That explains some things, Elise murmured. Last night was the first time I've ever seen him rattled, Nathaniel observed. When you were speaking with me, he looked afraid. It was quite revealing. Elise's phone vibrated with a text message. Julian, I hope your dinner is informative. I'll be waiting up. We have much to discuss. Something in the message's restraint touched her. The old Julian would have ignored her evening entirely. Nathaniel, she began carefully, your offer is extraordinary, but I need to understand. Is there more than professional interest behind it? His smile was rueful. I won't deny finding you captivating, Elise, but I'm not in the business of breaking marriages. I'm offering you this position because you're qualified and deserve it. Whatever else might develop between us would depend entirely on your situation with Julian. His honesty was refreshing. As dinner progressed, Elise found herself considering a life beyond the Hargrove Mansion's walls, traveling to vibrant communities, bringing music to people who hungered for it, reclaiming her identity beyond Julian's wife. Take some time, Nathaniel said as they parted outside the restaurant. The position is yours if you want it, regardless of any personal complications. His kiss on her cheek was gentle, respectful of boundaries while acknowledging possibilities. The house was mostly dark when Elise returned, save for light spilling from Julian's study. She found him standing by the window, silhouetted against the night, looking more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. How was dinner? He asked without turning. Enlightening, she replied. Nathaniel offered me the position. And Julian finally faced her, his expression carefully controlled. I told him I needed time to consider it. Julian took a deep breath. I've prepared something. Will you follow me? Curious, Elise followed him through the house to a door that had remained locked throughout their marriage. Julian produced a key and hesitated. Before we enter, I need to explain. When we married, I was determined to keep parts of myself separate from you. It seemed safer that way. He unlocked the door, revealing a room Elise had never seen. Moonlight streamed through large windows, illuminating a space dominated by a magnificent grand piano. The walls held framed concert programs, her concert programs, she realized with astonishment. Every performance from her final years at Juilliard and her brief professional career before their marriage. You collected these? She whispered, approaching a particularly rare program from her performance with the Boston Philharmonic. I attended everyone, Julian admitted quietly. I saw you perform Rachmaninoff in New York 2 months before we met. I'd never heard anyone play with such passion. Elise stared at him in disbelief. You knew who I was before our families arranged the marriage? I requested you specifically, he confessed, looking almost ashamed. When I heard the Winters family was in financial trouble, I convinced my father it was a perfect opportunity for a strategic alliance. You orchestrated our marriage because you... What? Admired my playing? Elise struggled to comprehend. Julian moved to the piano, running his fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. I thought having you here in my home would be enough. I convinced myself our arrangement was practical, beneficial for both of us. But the truth was far more selfish. What truth? Elise pressed, heart pounding. That I was fascinated by you, drawn to your passion, your talent. But I didn't know how to bridge the gap between admiration and more. So I retreated behind cold professionalism instead. For 2 years, Julian. 2 years of silence and distance. I know, he acknowledged, finally meeting her gaze. I told myself I was giving you space, but really I was afraid. Afraid of needing someone. Afraid of what I felt when you played. When I saw you with Foster, looking alive in a way you never do with me, I realized what I'd done to you. To us. Elise approached the piano, her fingers automatically finding a melancholy chord. Why show me this now? Because you deserve to know the truth before you decide. Julian moved closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth. I've been a coward hiding behind contracts and obligations. Foster was right about one thing, talent like yours shouldn't be hidden away. What are you saying? That whether you choose his offer or not, things must change. I want a real marriage, Elise, But I also want you to have your music back. Julian gently took her hands. I've arranged an audition with the Boston Symphony. Next week, if you're interested, and if you prefer Nathaniel's offer, I won't stand in your way. Tears welled in Elise's eyes. Why would you do this now, after all this time? Because losing you to a man who recognized your value from the start made me finally face what I've always known, that contracts and arrangements aren't enough. Not for us. His vulnerability was transformative, revealing the man behind the businessman's mask. Play something, he requested softly. Please, it's been too long since I heard you play. Elise settled at the piano, fingers hovering over keys that felt like old friends. She began with Debussy, notes floating into the night air, filling the space between them with something intangible yet powerful. Julian closed his eyes, the rigid lines of his face softening. When she finished, the silence between them held none of its usual tension. I used to listen outside the conservatory door, he confessed, when you thought you were playing alone. All this time, Elise whispered, you were listening? Always. Moving to sit beside her on the bench, Julian tentatively reached for her hand. I'm asking for a chance, Elise. Not because of some arrangement between our families, but because I want to know the woman whose music has haunted me for years. And what about my career? My independence? Essential, he said firmly. I don't want a decorative wife. I want a partner, brilliant, passionate, and entirely herself. Elise studied him, seeing beneath the polished exterior to the uncertain man beneath. No more separate bedrooms. No more silent breakfasts. No more pretending we're merely business associates. No more pretending, Julian agreed, his voice rough with emotion. She placed her hands on the keys again, beginning a piece that started in minor chords, but gradually transitioned to something hopeful and bright. Is that a yes? Julian asked when she finished, vulnerability naked in his eyes. It's a beginning, Elise replied, leaning forward to initiate their first real kiss. Not as business partners fulfilling an obligation, but as two people choosing each other despite their fears. Outside, the night sky cleared, stars emerging from behind clouds that had lingered too long. Inside, in a room that had held secrets and longing, two people began the delicate process of building something authentic from the shadows of obligation. When morning came, for the first time in 2 years, Julian and Elise Hargrove awoke in the same bed, the sound of her laughter replacing the silence that had defined their marriage for too long. The contract that had bound them was finally replaced by something far more powerful, choice. And in the coming weeks, as Elise's music filled their home and her career blossomed anew, they discovered that sometimes the most beautiful symphonies begin with discord, finding harmony only after confronting the challenging notes that make the resolution all the more sweet.